Very good morning to you. If you're just joining us, it's a little after 6:30. Let's bring you this story. Government is forcing people to ignore lockdown regulations. This is the view of the Free Market Foundation. It says government intervention in the economy has made it impossible for some to earn a living. The foundation says it should come as no surprise that taxis are loading at full capacity and travelling between provincial borders. Well, let's discuss these views now, and we're joined by the organization's Chris Hattingh. Mr. Hattingh, good morning to you. Let me first preface our discussion by actually retracting some of what we're saying in that intro, because I think in that article you make it clear that these are your personal views and not those of the Free Market Foundation. Am I correct?
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, and good morning to the viewers as well. You are correct. We share a wide range of views at the foundation, and while we put out articles in our own names, we ensure that some of the views we bring across might not be shared by our colleagues. So we always add that little proviso.
All right. So I take it then that the Free Market Foundation shares in some of what you are saying, but nonetheless, let's soldier on. So instead of a hard lockdown, what should government have done?
So I believe a hard lockdown is what I would call the hammer approach, whereas a more nuanced approach might have been better. Of course, COVID-19 presented a big threat to the health of all South Africans, so perhaps a better approach would have been track and trace. For example, isolating those individuals who have COVID-19, isolating them in quarantine, and then making sure that they receive the proper care, whereas we took the approach of locking down the entire country. I think in a country of South Africa's massive inequalities, that's the wrong approach. We expected that some people in the poorer areas would follow the same regulations as people in the more well-off areas. As we've seen the last few months, many of us can actually afford to continue working from home because we have Wi-Fi and connectedness and that sort of thing. Whereas for other people in poorer areas, they simply do not have those luxuries, and we've denied them the ability to earn a living.
Yeah. You argue in that article, Chris, and I just want to read some of what you said there. You're saying that government should not be in the business of dishing out subsidies nor pursuing preferential treatment policies, because all that this does is take away the element of competitiveness. I want to ask of you very clearly, does that include policies such as BEE, affirmative action, you name it?
So in South Africa, you have to take cognizance of the history of the country and the racial inequality. So I think that's where a lot of the moral and philosophical thrust for policies such as BEE and affirmative action come from. But when you look at how they shake out and the effect that they have, when government intervenes in the economy in any way, it stacks the deck against some versus others. So government has certain connections, it has certain people or organizations it would prefer to see win in that way. We've seen just how difficult the financial situation has become in the country. So, for example, when the government promised the 500 billion rand relief package for COVID-19, I thought it was inevitable that different groups would start vying for that relief. So, for example, what we're seeing with the taxi industry, where other industries have received subsidies before, for example, buses, even the Gautrain receive subsidies, and now the taxi industry feels, well, if other industries receive this, why shouldn't we? So we shouldn't be surprised that the taxi industry is taking matters into its own hands. When government steps in and promises to provide relief, there will always be competing voices. I think that's why it's much better for the country to follow the path of economic freedom, where you allow different industries to be robust before a crisis such as COVID-19 hits. People should please keep in mind that the economic hardships of the country have been long present, long before COVID-19. I believe the disease has simply exposed a lot of the problems that existed before.
Yeah. The president, Chris, holds the view that what COVID-19 offers the country is an opportunity for a new economy that is going to be slightly more balanced, but there is the proviso that it's got to be actively pursued so that it is achieved.
So I think the president, he's perhaps in a very difficult situation. On the one hand, he has to promise big government plans, big government spending for growth. And on the other hand, I'm sure the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni, has made clear to the President that there isn't that much room for big government spending. So the government needs to decide exactly where its priorities lie without putting itself in a very difficult position. I think for South Africa to truly have radical economic transformation, which I think many of us, if not most of us, desire, we need to pursue a different path, a path of different policies, not the same things we've tried before. We've had many presidential summits and meetings, a lot of compacts, all this sort of stuff, government spending, but they haven't resulted in the desired outcomes. We've got over 30% unemployment. That's the official statistic. Youth unemployment is reaching almost 60%. So we've seen that these policies of big government spending, of government intervention, of government control simply do not work. If we want to see radical economic transformation, we need to see economic freedom, individual freedom. We need to remove barriers to trade. We need to lower labor costs. And in that regard, I think we will see the economic growth that the President is consistently talking about.
Yeah. I'm not clear, though, Chris, about where your standpoint is in as far as what you say are policies that are not only interference, but also they take away people's sense of agency. I, again, want to talk to you or question you a bit about what your standpoint is on BEE and affirmative action, because it is quite a debate in this country, particularly at this time, given also what government has done in responding to COVID-19, because it has sought to prioritize your BEE empowerment policy narrative.
Yeah, so again, I'll point there to government being in a difficult position. It has said it will help BEE businesses first sort of in line ahead of other owned businesses, for example, white-owned businesses. So government has put itself in that position. It feels it must pursue that sort of narrative. I will come at it from a different perspective where I simply say, do we want the path of agency and dignity and freedom and taking ownership, or do we want the path of government giving aid the whole time and government leading the way? I think we're in this difficult position because we've given the government way too much control and power,
but
whereas
Chris,
it should be the other way around.
Can I interrupt you there for a sec? Aren't you running the risk of reproducing the very same skewed inequality patterns that we have seen over the years by pursuing what you're saying are policies that are completely, that allow people the freedom to do what it is that they want to do?
I think at the moment, the heightened inequality we're seeing as a result of government intervention, because it's stacking the deck against some people as opposed to others, we need to change from a redistribution mindset to a creation mindset. At the moment, we're just wanting to redistribute wealth. And fair enough, that might be noble intentioned, but eventually we're going to run out of wealth no matter who owns it. So if we don't change tack now and grow the wealth pie and allow people to grow their own wealth, then I think we're simply going to continue spiraling into more and more difficult positions. We need to think of how can each person be enabled to create wealth for themselves. And then, of course, you can talk about policies where maybe the government spends on infrastructure or something like that. Of course, that's a debate, a more technical debate on another side. But you need to simply reassess. We need to reassess our thinking where we don't think there's only one wealth pie in the country. It needs to be divided. We need to enable each and every person to make wealth for themselves and for their own individual families.
All right. Chris Hattingh, thank you very much for your time.